Hello and welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have interesting strangers on every single week. Today, if you want to introduce yourself right here, we got...
I'm dwellephant.
What's your actual name? I was going to say, I did find it, but it's very hard to find.
So it would kind of be hilarious if you just beep it out when I say it.
I might actually do that.
Because I typically don't use my real name ever for anything.
It's really hard to find. Yeah, it's really hard to find. I had to really do some digging. I don't even really remember how I found it.
It's on my website, but it's hard to find, but I think it's there. I don't know. It's funny that it's not it's very funny that it's somehow still not everywhere.
I know. I almost want to sort of put the blur on your face so we can really, really tease it and hide your identity.
I thought about that. Could we, go in afterwards and just I can just draw a bunch of shit over my face?
I think that'd be super funny. So I guess to start off, since we're talking about it, where does dwellephant come from? Where does that name come from?
The shortest version of that story possible is I lived in Columbus for a while when I was going to art school, and I had a friend that was hanging out with some folks that were kind of entering into the comic book universe, actually publishing stuff. And one or two of them were just super into themselves, having their name be hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm so-and-so. And I hated that. And I was like, I want to do everything anonymously. So I happened to have a stack of library books, and I was reading about elephants, and there was a lot of stuff about how elephants live that's similar to how I live. So I was like, oh, I want to dwell like an elephant. Oh, dwellephant. I just went and reserved the URL. This was a long time ago.
What was the similarities that you saw?
The big one was kind of that they, and somebody out there I'm sure will be able to correct this or refine this accurately.
Sure.
But I remember reading that one type of elephant can cross a desert, and if they come upon remains, they know if it's a relative, and then they will keep the remains. And not that I'm keeping the remains of my family, but when people pass away in my family, I tend to get the stuff that's left over after everyone kind of goes through things. So and I also it's like a little mini museum at my house of different family members. So I have my grandpa's dog tag from World War II. I have, when my grandma passed away, her stack of cards that her sisters would send her. Nobody wanted those, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take those. So I just have a lot of stuff that's it's theirs, and I don't know. I've always been that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So with all your art, you talked about going to art school and stuff like that. Was that something even before art school that you were yes, I want to make a career out of this, or did you just not even think that was possible, or how did that go?
I was not. I was a smart kid, but I don't think I was sophisticated enough to see career potential in myself. My mom tells it that my only career ambition ever was to be a clown. The beginning and end of me thinking about a job was I want to be a clown. I was just always creative, and when I was in senior year of high school, my parents were oh, so have you thought about plans after? And I was truly, sincerely I'm either going to go be in a band like the Ramones, or I'm just going to travel around and write like Jack Kerouac. And they were oh, you should consider college.
Wait, were you in a band at that point?
I played bass. You're in high school bands.
Sure.
Just a bunch of stuff. But then I also played, my family is Serbian American. And so growing up, you learn all the folk music and dancing. And I played upright bass in the youth folk ensemble. So
was it your parents who sort of pushed you to go to art school, or just a school?
They just wanted me to, they saw potential like a good parent should. And they were you should do something more with your life. And so I applied to 2 colleges, and one was an art school. One was for writing. I would have gone for writing. And when I saw that I had to take advanced math, I was nope, art school it is.
So were you drawing consistently up to that point, or was this something that because you went to art school and you got kind of thrown into that, you started taking it more seriously?
No, that's the weird thing. Once I figured out how to draw and color, I was real into it. It just seemed it was meant to be, and I was still drawing and like, I would draw stuff for friends, really into like art competitions in high school and stuff. But I just never really thought about making a living.
Sure. Yeah. It's hard sometimes to like connect the dots too. And I talk about this a lot with people in the arts. It seems like you don't really get a lot of examples, like real world examples of people that are doing this as a job when you grow up. It's like, oh, I could be like, what, an art teacher, or that's it. Right. There's not a lot of like people encouraging you like, oh no, there's tons of different things you could do, or like you could freelance, and like, there's just not a lot of that happening. Yeah.
And this was like, I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but this was pre-internet. So there's no like, oh, this person posting a video about their process or like telling you how they got this opportunity, like none of that. So I was kind of under the impression that like, if I'm lucky enough, someone will see my art and I'll be like the next Bill Watterson or something, but you're right. Like there is a disconnect between like really talented people and a way to like help them not have to work a job they don't care about.
Right. Yeah. And so, sort of talking about that, where did your style and like develop from? Because I feel like you're very known for like this specific style that you draw in. Was that something that you had initially, or was that obviously like a ton of refinements over time that got to that point?
I think the way I draw now, I honestly don't, and like this isn't just like a funny art language. I really don't know how it happened. Growing up, like when I first started, I would try and emulate everything I saw. So you start out tracing like Garfield and whatever's lying around just to learn how to do it. And then throughout high school, I think I was just trying to do a lot of stuff with like big eye, cartoony, like big eyes and like huge tongues. When I got to art school, I went to school for graphic design in the end. Like I tried a little bit of everything, and I was still drawing, but like I was fascinated by graphic design and advertising. Eventually, like when I moved to Milwaukee, I feel like I definitely turned a noticeable corner. Like my style changed dramatically. But I think where I'm at now, it's been a lot of like, I just try to be, it might sound weird, but like, I just try to like listen to what my like brain and my hand wants to do, like not get in the way of myself and let the lines and shapes fall how they fall.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just talking to someone about this sort of idea that it's hard a lot of the times with art because you're taught art basically in school, and there's these like parameters on everything, like there's all these rules that you got to follow and you got to like make sure you do that. Otherwise it's not good what you're doing. And right, to break out of that and to sort of allow yourself to be more creative is a hard thing to do sometimes. But that sounds sort of like that's your process. You just sort of let it go, let's see what happens.
Yeah. You're a filmmaker, right? Mm-hmm. I couldn't even fathom like growing up and watching films, and then going and trying to make it and like filter out your influences. Cause at least with art, you can like I liked a handful of things, but like America doesn't put art everywhere. So I wasn't constantly bombarded with reminders of like what people love or like box office numbers.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like you're at a disadvantage,
Yeah, it did become hard. When I first started shooting and recording video when I was like in middle school or elementary school with like a VHS recorder, I think that was like the most important part of like starting at such a young age where I didn't care at all about any rules, and I didn't even really know what the rules were. So I just sort of adapted that sort of mindset over time of like, I'm just going to make stuff that I enjoy, and if people connect with it, great. If people don't, at least I like doing it,
That's a hard, like what you're talking about is really tough, because I remember when I started the ad program in Columbus, I went to the Columbus College of Art and Design, and it was like a really good school, like a boot camp for your skills, but I didn't have a computer when I started my like design classes. So I was doing everything by hand, and then I'd run in and like scan as much as I could in the computer lab. So by the time I got a computer, like my style was so rooted in me just like doing things this really complicated and remedial way, it wound up being an advantage. And I think like what you're talking about gives you an advantage as well. Like you're not doing it the same way that everyone else is doing it from the start. You're kind of like, you can beep this out, but like you're fucking around, and you find success when you do that.
Right. And it's also hard to stick to something if you're so concerned about like what everyone thinks, because it's so easy to get discouraged and just like you end up not even liking what path you go down, you know?
Yeah. Although I feel like for me, I feel like a lot of times I just assume most people aren't going to like the thing I'm making. And
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all are.
Yeah.
Like that's what makes you, I think that's what makes, I mean, I know it's what makes me keep doing it is like, I never feel like I'm doing it right yet, or I'm good enough yet, or like reaching that level I want to be at yet. So,
right. There's always room for improvement and room to challenge yourself. Yeah, I definitely, I feel that way too. Is that sort of reflective of like why you draw on so many different mediums? Like, I think the way I found you initially was through all your drawings and illustrations on like coffee cups.
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing I saw. And I was like, oh man, this is so cool. And so is that sort of why that works, is because like you just want to do it and you just enjoy it, that you can just like, oh, I'll draw on whatever, give me trash and I'll draw on it.
It is. It 100% is. Like I've carried a Sharpie in my pocket since I was like 17 every day. Like I always have it. Cause at the very least, if I don't have a pad and a pen, I have something I can draw with. And the coffee cup thing for me started because like they were like beautiful blank canvases, you know, and I'd throw it away and be like, oh wait, why am I not just drawing on this? So I started it. And then like, honestly, most of the stuff that I wound up doing frequently is like things that people enjoy. Cause I feel like it's finding consistent joy is pretty tricky, you know? So that, at least for me, I feel like I'm contributing to the betterment of the planet in some tiny way. Like, oh, I made 3 people happy today. That's great. I feel great.
You go to like really creative lengths. Like even recently, I was talking to you about this. You started drawing on fruit and like vegetables that people submitted. When you think of things like that to do, and I don't want this to sound offensive at all, but is it because like you're just sort of like sitting around and be like, I want to do something, and so that idea comes? Because I feel like a lot of my creative ideas come around when I'm like bored, and they're really good ideas then.
Yeah, that's not offensive at all, first of all.
Nice.
What happened, the very first one, you know, I woke up scrolling through Instagram and I see my friend Justin posted this pepper and he saw a face in it. I just reached over, I grabbed my iPad and I was like, yeah, I want to finish that face for you. And that was the extent of it. Like, I just was like, this will be it. And then later that night, his wife sent me one. And then the next day, unsolicited, like I was just getting photos of people's vegetables.
What a weird feed to go through, like for someone to look through your phone.
Yeah, I mean, but it's funny because like people are super into it now. And like yesterday I got 2 that are like really challenging, and I got one is like a bunch of chopped vegetables. I'm like, oh, people are trying now, like just to mess with me.
To throw you off.
Yeah. But it's super fun. And honestly, like most of the best jobs I've gotten in my entire career have been because of me goofing around like that.
Yeah, I was going to say there has to be some sort of, so when people like reach out to you and they're like, hey, I would like you to work on this project for me or work with me on this project. How different is that than people, like I read on your blog, you did a story about how someone reached out to you about a funeral and they wanted to use some of your work for it. How does that feel when someone connects with it so deeply that they like have to have it, like something that you already made?
So I think the first one of those was the flying pig one. And honestly, I remember that person emailing me and I was just like floored. And I tried to talk him out of it at first because I'm like, are you sure? Like, have you thought this through? Is this maybe just like grief clouding your better judgment? But like, it's one of the most like flat, like the biggest compliment you can get, I think, is for someone to say, hey, this thing that you wrote for yourself like years ago reminds me of my dad. And like, we'd like to pay tribute to him that way. I've done 2 or 3 now. And every time I'm just like, this is crazy, you know? And it also for me, like helped me because the first time it happened early on. And it really helped me redefine what I thought of as success. Because I think like, would I love, you know, like Disney money or Nike money? Like, sure. Like who's going to say no to that? But like, I never in a million years thought about, wow, like here's the thing that only a small group of people are going to see for a few hours on one day. And most of them are probably going to throw it out, you know, but like it is the most meaningful thing I've ever been asked to do. That to me, like when that happened the first time, I'm like, oh, that is like a level of that's success to me now. Like that helped me redefine what I think about like achieving or making it.
Yeah, because it is interesting to me, like the difference between you having something already done and someone being interested rather than you like creating something from scratch based on something that someone pitched you. Because it's like this weird like interconnection thing where it's like someone connected with something that you did a while ago that wasn't even intended for that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And like, that's your hope ultimately, is that like you put stuff out in the universe and somebody connects with it. Like, but when it happens in such a delayed way, and for, like you're saying, for like such a significant thing, like, yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it's a different kind of pride. Like I have no problem saying I'm proud of the fact that that happened.
We sort of talked about a lot of different stuff that you draw on, and a lot of different mediums that you used. I saw on your website that you like posters the best to create. Why is that?
I think it's because it's like combining a little bit. It combines a lot of the things I love, you know, like it mixes type, it mixes writing, illustration, design. There aren't as many boundaries when you're creating a poster. You know, you can introduce all sorts of things if you want. You can get weird with it. You can have multiple styles in one piece. Where I don't feel like you get that if someone commissions you for a painting, like they're looking for a painting in your style. You know, like they're not necessarily asking you to get experimental.
Sure.
I feel like that's a good thing. I like the challenge of creating some sort of like micro story within the piece itself. Or, you know, I did one for a movie for the film festival years ago, and like all I had was like a low res trailer to watch for reference, but it was about like a poetry program in Chicago, you know, for these high school kids. And so it was like, well, great, I'm going to do this in orange and blue because it's Bears colors. I'm going to make it look like a giant notebook page. I'm going to doodle out a line from this poem and then have like a little microphone at the bottom, like near the credit. Like just it let me kind of like bring in all this stuff that I wouldn't get to do otherwise on most projects.
So when you like are creating, you know, your art, you sort of alluded to the fact that you sort of let your mind and you know your hand go. But are you thinking of like a story, or like are you thinking of certain things when you are drawing or illustrating that inform you, or is it sort of like a weird like blackout thing where you're like drawing and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm done?
I think it's all of those things, you know, at different times. So there are times where I sit down and I'm like, all right, I want to draw a thing that looks this way. I want to tell this story. I want to draw these things. Other times I'll just like, you know, late at night, like I'll sit there and I'll just paint for like 2 hours. And then it's weird because I always say like, you kind of snap out of it at the end and you look at what you've done and you're like, huh, all right, I know I did it. I don't remember like making those decisions. I was just kind of in the zone, but so it's a mix of everything. And more often than not, when you're doing work for somebody, you have to have a plan, because very rarely do people just say like, here's $1,000, make me something, you know, like they're like, oh, we want this, and this, here's the stuff you have to use, figure it out.
Yeah. Is it tougher to do projects like that? Do they make you like work out of your like style, or do people come to you because of your style and are like, hey, I want, you know, something that you would do for this poster, for this t-shirt? Or is it like, we have a different vision? You know what I mean? Yeah.
I had like when I first was freelancing, so I went from like self-employment, then I worked at a couple places, and now I'm back to like self-employment again. That first go round, I would let myself get talked into doing things that I shouldn't, like working in someone else's style or working outside of my comfort zone, partly because I just needed to eat and I wasn't, you know, like when it's lean, you got to take the jobs. But also I just didn't know any better. I didn't have that confidence that like I could tell someone, no, that's not how I work. So there've been a couple times where that's happened. Now I don't let it happen. You know, if someone comes to me and they're like, we'd love for you to do this, but in this style, I'd be like, that's not actually, I won't do a good job if you ask me to not work in my style. So here are 3 people you should talk to instead. I think now, like I try to keep an eye on who's making stuff, you know, in the world, so that I have a referral base I can just send out when those jobs come around.
Yeah. When you initially graduated from art school, how did you kind of figure out what direction you wanted to go? Because there's so many different lanes you could have taken it. Like, what drew you to the sort of, I guess, freelance style you are currently?
I gotta honestly say, like, I've never had a plan until like the last year. I've truly just like winged it, and that's not necessarily the best way, but like it worked for me. When I graduated, I worked at an agency in Columbus for like a year, and then I moved here in 2003 with a bunch of friends, and I was like, I don't really like working for people. I'm just gonna do it on my own, and that was it. Like, foolishly did not have a lot of money saved up, or like I didn't have a network of people in Milwaukee. I was just like, I'll figure it out. It'll happen. But what I know about myself is like, I can work with people, but I have trouble working for people. In general, I think I have a problem with authority a little bit, but like, I also just don't want to, like you take a job at a place and you're working for the place and you have to do what that place does. But like, for me, there's stuff where I like once in a while, like taking a thing that puts me out of my comfort zone in a project way, like, oh, I've never done this before. I'd love to try that. Or, like doing a poster for someone and like pushing it a little bit and saying, like, look, I know all your competitors are doing posters that look like this, but what if we do something really weird? Like, I just want to be able to do that. I want the freedom to do that.
Sure. And was that sort of the turning point that you talked about before? Because you talked about you had a big turning point when you moved to Milwaukee with your art. Is that just because you sort of decided that you wanted to go down a different lane, basically? I think it was just like my happiness in general changed. Like, it was an exciting thing for like all of us to just move to a new city together and be like, yeah, let's be artists together. Like, let's do this. It just felt good. And I think that loosened me up style wise. The other major turning point for me in my career was like probably 7 or 8 years ago. I just got completely burned out and stopped taking commission. I had commissions I never finished. I have a couple that I got burned out. Like, it is a legitimate thing and everyone should try and avoid it. But I found myself just doing so much work I didn't want to do, or work that wasn't like, I was doing so much work for other people and wasn't doing work for myself that there was no, like, making art wasn't fulfilling at that moment. So I just kind of like went away for a little bit, got jobs at places, I was still being creative in a different way, but like, it helped me realize like, no, I need to be doing this, but I need to be like firm about like, this is what I do. This is how I do it. If you don't like that, I will tell you other people that will make you happy, but like, I can't, No. Yeah, I know what you mean. And that sort of brings up something I want to talk about is like, you talked about a little bit there, but when you do something that you like love to do and you enjoy it, it becomes hard sometimes, I feel like, to balance like getting paid doing that thing, but also still doing it for fun, because you're doing it for jobs so much that it's just like, I feel like sometimes, creating video content, it's like the last thing I want to do when I get home is like make more videos, like just for fun, Right. I'm just so tired of like doing it from like a day of working. And so how did you find a way to sort of like balance that and make it so you were happy still doing what you do?
TBD on that one. Like, I feel like I'm very fortunate right now. Like, the workload that I have in front of me right now came to me because of me working my way, like my personality, my style, even some of the like marketing and writing work. It's like people who are just trusting me to do things the way I do it. I don't have to like stifle myself or my personality. I think what's been motivating for me is like, they came to me for me, and so I'm going to deliver me, and like the other thing with that, I desperately need to update my website, but like what I started doing was like pulling off the stuff that I don't want to get hired to do anymore. Like, I think that's a big lesson that I would encourage everybody to, if you're not already doing it. I think most people do because they're like smarter than me in that way, but like, definitely if you're an artist, like, you don't have to show every project you've worked on. Just show the shit you want to get hired for. Otherwise you're gonna be miserable.
Yeah, no, that's honestly, I didn't think about that until just now. And yeah, it makes me rethink like my website. And maybe I should go back and pull some stuff off. But no, yeah, that is very true. And one of the projects that you did when I was sort of looking at all your work, you did like comics for, what was the actual like publication called?
It was called Vital Source.
Vital Source. And it was here in Milwaukee, right? For like how many, like 2 or 3 years?
Yeah. I think it's how I met Matt Wild.
Oh, from Milwaukee Record?
Yeah. I believe, I mean, I definitely, that's how I learned about him because he had a column in it. But I feel like that's how I met him. And now we're friends.
and you in that did like comics, but you did them based on like your own memories, which I thought was like super interesting, like a super interesting way to go about it. How did you pick out like what memories you wanted to use? Because I'm sure there was tons of stuff that you remembered that would have been like, oh, that would be interesting to put. So basically like the setup was, so I can explain it to people and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like, there's illustrations and there's like a bunch of text. And so, yeah, how did you sort of figure out which ones you wanted to use?
So it was called drawing from memory because I just, going back to that idea of like, you just have it, you're like sitting around bored and you have an idea. I'm like, oh, drawing from memory, like that sounds funny. Like, how can I use this? Figuring out the memories was just, there was definitely some stuff that I felt like was significant to me, but then I would like want to filter it through like, okay, if I'm a person reading this, is this like a unique experience or, and then like, if it is, like there was one about a dog that was like, I was packing up to drive home. And it was just waiting for me. It was like a stray dog that was just sitting there and like would follow me from car to front door. And it's like somebody could experience something like that. Like it's a unique moment. It's not happening every day, but like it's special enough to stand out to someone who's never experienced it, but also like kind of relatable enough, and like that was kind of the filter I'd put it through. Cause like, I didn't want to be like, oh, I had a great sandwich at this restaurant. Like, yeah, everybody's had a sandwich, man. That was my approach. Like I wanted people to like be able to be like, oh, that is a cool memory. I have something similar, or like, oh, wow, I've never experienced that before. Yeah,
no, it's a super cool idea. And it was like really beautifully executed. If people are listening, definitely go check it out. It's still on your website. You just have to go back a little bit, but yeah, they're super cool. I was like, man, this is such a great idea.
I'm also not like, whenever I get asked to do comics, like I'm not like a comic. I can't do sequential art. Like I'm not good at it. I've had like opportunities to storyboard, or like someone asked me to do like a comic book album art thing. And I'm like, no, it's going to be bad. Like that's just a roadblock for me. I can't do that. So that's the other, like the one panel thing was that I could handle.
Yeah. What do you think it is about like the sequential, like drawing that you just don't like?
I mean, I honestly wish I could do it, and I've tried. Like the kids book I did was a graphic novel, but it's just like I feel like with every time I redraw a character, like I'm messing it up, and by the time you're going to get to the end of the book, it's going to be a whole different person.
Which would be kind of a cool book, actually.
Right? Well, yeah. Edit that out. We'll make it. I'll give you 50%.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Missing the Boat? Right? Is that the book?
Yeah.
How did you keep it like consistent enough through a whole book? Because obviously at the end it can't be like insanely different. You're like in a different book at the end. How did you work through that and like figure out how to do that?
For that one, all those pages are hand painted. So I would do a board and then have it in front of me while I worked on the next one. And it was just like erasing, and the shapes are kind of simple enough where I knew I could consistently draw that, but it was really just like after I'd finished one board, I'd put it up so I had it as reference, and like that way, if there are changes, at least from page to page, they're not that drastic.
Yeah. Do you have like a specific project that you did or that you have done that has meant like the most to you? I mean, we talked about the pig one for the funeral that meant a lot, but is there any others that like still in your memory you're like, wow, that was like really impactful for me for whatever reason? I mean,
the funeral cards, I did one of the other comics that I was doing for a while. I did one in tribute to my friend Butch and his daughter, like his daughter and the rest of their family, like really were touched by it. Anything like that where it like resonates with people on this like very deep personal level. like those little things. I don't think I have, I've been doing this for a while. So like, I can't think of like a project that like reached a lot of eyeballs that had that same heft to me. It's always the stuff that just like someone personally reaches out and says to you, like, this meant a lot to me.
Yeah. I find it interesting sometimes when you create something with like a certain intent, sort of talking about like the funeral one, and someone sort of interprets it like very differently, but in a still very deep way. I think that's like really fascinating that you can have this intent for a piece and like you sort of view it in a certain way, and someone takes it in a completely different direction that you never even saw. And even in like recent times, has there been any other projects like that, you know, someone who like decided that they wanted to purchase one of your pieces to use for another purpose, that saw it in like a completely different way and impacted them in like a completely different way than you saw?
You know, like it happens frequently, but it's usually with just personal stuff that I'll make and share. And I'll post it and I'll get a message from someone and they might misinterpret it completely, but I'll never correct them. And I think that to me is really important. Like I don't like explaining pieces. Like if I do a gallery show, I don't like artist statements. I don't like explaining a body of work.
Sure.
Nothing against them personally, but for me, like I like the idea that even if that someone's going to feel something about a piece, and I don't want to rob them of that by saying like, oh, your feelings are incorrect.
You're wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless it's like extremely obvious what you should be feeling and like your feeling is horribly misguided, you know, in a damaging way. But like by and large, like you just gotta let people feel the thing and try not to correct them.
It's one of the things that like fascinates me about art and about people in general is that like with everyone's experiences and how your brain works, you can get such different emotions and thoughts on a piece.
I gotta say too, like anytime I answer questions about art, I'm like, these answers have evolved over the course of my life, you know, like since I've been doing it, and they're probably going to change in a month or two when I have a different experience. Like,
right. That's
something I think people got to remember in general often is like your perspective should evolve.
Yeah, right. That's the hope. That's the hope for sure. Someone got one of your pieces tattooed on them, which is permanent forever.
That's happened. Yeah, that's happened a fair amount.
What is that experience like for you? Like seeing your piece on a human? Like,
yeah, that is, I mean, equivalent to the funeral card thing, like that is forever. Like getting commissioned to do them. You know, I've gotten commissioned to do them because of my handwriting. Like people just had a phrase and they're like, I love your handwriting. That's cool as hell. I had a woman from, I think, Finland commission me to do like this one that like I would have wanted everyone to commission me to do. It was like 2 rabbits falling in the sky, holding hands with like a heart. And that's the kind of stuff. Yes. Approach me for that kind of work, please. But the even better than knowing that's happening is when someone tells you they did it and you didn't know.
Oh,
like I was at Hi-Fi once and someone who I now know was like, oh my God, you're dwellephant. I got this piece of art of yours tattooed on me. And it was like full side of their body.
Whoa.
Like, at least that's how I remember it. But like, I was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like you did, that's like the best surprise.
Yeah. Was that a whole, like a print that you did, or like, how do they do that?
It was a drawing that was like probably this small on a menu at Classic Slice. And they just loved the drawing and took it to the tattoo artist and like probably blew it up Xerox and just did it. And like, yeah, more power to you. I really don't know what would be like the next level of it.
I don't think there is another level. I think that's the pinnacle. I think getting tattooed your artwork on people is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Since you do artwork and things in, you know, places all over, that you do it on coffee cups, you do it in public and private. Do you have a certain space where you can, I guess, create the best or like feel the best about creating? Is there like a certain space you need to be in, or like headspace even?
You feel it, like, you know, when you're there. So like sometimes I'll make stuff on the couch. Sometimes I'll like drag all my art supplies out to the living room and just have them like on the table, like just consuming the whole space. I have a like studio space in our apartment, but like, and I'll make stuff there all the time, but it really isn't like I have to be there to do it. For me, I think it's partly because I don't think this is like a trade craft that I learned. My friend Elia, who's an artist, said it the other day, and I never thought about it, but like I would say that artist is definitely like part of my identity because I don't remember it not being there. So it's that desire to constantly do it never goes away. What makes me like halfway decent at it is learning the different skills that I can apply to the talent that I already had, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you ever scared that it's going to go away? Like, are you ever scared that you're not going to want to create or something like that? Or are you just not, is that not a concern?
No, I get more scared about like, will I get arthritis when I'm old? Not be able to, like truly, like what if something happens to my hand? Like,
no, that's a valid point.
I got to start learning how to draw with my other hand real quick.
Yeah. Are you a lefty or a righty?
Righty.
Okay. Yeah. Is that a skill that people have, like that they can, I don't know. I feel like that would be almost like a fair, like a state fair sort of thing where you can draw both sides at the same time.
I know, like I've seen it once or twice, like somebody doing it, but I feel like it would be the equivalent of, you know, like the right hand has years of experience and expertise, and the left hand is like learning how to do it for the first time. So it'll never catch up. Like there's just no way.
Right. It would be an interesting sort of side-by-side drawing if you like drew one thing with your right hand and one thing with your left to see like the comparison of how far back it is.
Everything is 50% off if you let me do it with the left hand.
Yeah, exactly. There's a left-handed discount if you want to use it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Obviously, you have a website, social media channels. What are those so people can find you?
Dwellephant.com, and then Instagram is @dwellephant.
And there's a bunch of cool stuff on Instagram. And if you want to send him more fruits and vegetables to draw on, that's probably the platform. Do people send you DMs on Instagram with fruits and vegetables now?
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's like I've gotten to a point where I have to start like cataloging it.
Making like folders.
I have like a list and when they sent it, who did it, what their handle is. Cause I don't want to miss anybody, but like it's a bit now.
How many still do you have to, is there a ton still you have to do?
I probably got like 7 yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I woke up to 2 this morning. So
they're coming in consistently.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's great. I love putting faces on things that don't have faces. So it worked out good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm a huge fan of your work and I think you're a tremendous artist. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I love the podcast. When you reached out, I'd been listening, but I went back and my original goal is to come in and just answer every question with all of Tyler Moss answers.
That would have been a great one. A re-interview with someone else other than Tyler Moss with the same one. Oh, that's so great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Have a good day.